Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network, and it is officially game week for Tennessee and Iowa as they prepare to square off in the Citrus Bowl. I'm with Adam Jacobi of GoIowaAwesome.com. They do a great job over on the Rivals Network covering the Hawkeyes. So I have a couple questions for him. First of all, how are you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well, Ryan. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Just got done chatting a little bit about our holidays. So it's a fun time of the year though, coming up on the new year with all these bowl games as well. First things first, I want to kind of get a feel for what this Iowa football season's looked like. Can we get a quick rundown maybe of what this season's looked like? It's been I guess a successful one. It's been a kind of funny one to watch from afar, but if you get to the Big Ten championship, you've got to be happy, right?
You would think so. The fan base, it's been a strange 10-2 season, or I guess now 10-3 after the Big Ten championship. But it was a strange 10-win season for the Hawkeyes this year. And a big part of that is just the fact that the offense was predicted to be bad and ended up worse. Some of that had to do with just rotten luck with injuries and the fact that transfer quarterback Cade McNamara blew out his knee pretty quickly in the season.
Hmm.
And backup transfer quarterback Deacon Hill, who was really not expected to be a major contributor at quarterback, ended up shouldering the load for the last two-thirds of the season and ended up, delivering Iowa to the Big Ten West championship, a division championship, which, you know, the Big Ten West was not the best division in college football this year. Spoiler alert, Ryan. But it is a division championship, right? There's no like third column for, there's not wins, losses, and wins we don't really like as much, right? It's the same W's and L's. So the fact that they were able to persevere through really a terrible offensive season and end up getting win after win after win, it was unique. It was sometimes frustrating for fans, especially the ones that enjoy seeing the scoreboard, sort of get lit up a little bit more often. But ultimately, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's only so much you can complain about a 10-win season.
So when teams enter bowl games, it's kind of funny because sometimes a team is really happy to be in the bowl game they are, and then you have a situation like the Orange Bowl this year, where you have a Georgia team and a FSU team that are both pretty upset that they're only in the Orange Bowl. I think for Tennessee, it's safe to say that there's some that maybe expected a back-to-back New Year's Six appearance and are a little bit upset about a Citrus Bowl, but I think the majority feel pretty good about the spot they're in, and the team itself seems pretty motivated to play in this game. On the Iowa side, what are the thoughts about ending the season in the Citrus Bowl?
Well, it's going to be looked at as a success because the team looks at the season with certain team goals, and one of them is to win the Big Ten outright. And they didn't get there, but they got to the championship game. Right. They did win the division, right? They did have individual success, like Jay Higgins makes it from backup to All American in 1 year. Cooper DeJean really came close to having a Heisman style season at cornerback, and just sort of things out of his control kept him from getting that far. But we're still like only talking
Mhm.
about a first team All American season instead, right? But came close to something even greater than that, which is a little bit amazing. So, and at Iowa, we're talking about a program that has never won a championship in the BCS era or thereafter, or the college football playoff era. We're talking about a team that's never made the playoff, hasn't won the Rose Bowl itself since the 1950s, right? So there were some frustrations among fans this year, and for those Tennessee fans who go down to Orlando and talk to Iowa fans, you're going to hear about those
Mhm.
frustrations because you know, Iowa fans do like to hold grudges. That's part of the Midwest nice equation too. But by and large, it's not as if a result like this, 10-3, division championship, Citrus Bowl, that doesn't fall below certain guidelines that most reasonable fans have because Iowa doesn't clear bars higher than that very often.
Mhm.
And we're talking about once every few decades when Iowa does. So this is, for a program like Iowa, pretty darn close to a great season, a special season in and of itself already.
So when these bowl games come up, it's tough sometimes to really judge a team because of all the opt-outs and all the transfers that happen in this era of college football. For the Vols, you have one opt-out, your 1,000-yard rusher and Jalen Wright. He's declared for the NFL draft, but you do have a good amount of transfers that have hit the portal. A lot of them already finding their new homes, mostly on the defensive side of the ball. For Iowa, what does that look like so far? Any key pieces missing in the transfer portal that aren't going to play, or opt-outs that have already kind of decided that they're going to look at the next level?
It's funny that you ask that because Iowa is a little bit of a dinosaur of the college football world in a lot of ways. Playbook being one of them, but another one, another type is that the team is pretty much intact at this point. The biggest source of losses for this game personnel wise isn't the transfer portal. It's not opt-outs or the NFL draft. It's injuries. It's injuries to guys like Caden McNamara, Eric All, and Luke Lachey, the two All-American caliber tight ends. Right, they want to be out there. Cooper DeJean is out with a broken foot, so those guys want to be out there. They can't be out there, and that is unusual among teams, and even for Iowa, it's a little bit unusual. They had more people opting out of the Music City Bowl last year
Yeah.
than they do for the Citrus Bowl this year. So they've done a great job somehow of keeping the wagon circled and keeping everybody intact. So Iowa should be pretty close personnel wise to 100% of the guys that are physically capable of being out there, but DeJean is a perfect example of how Iowa won't be at 100%, and he's a guy that opens up a lot of doors for the Hawkeyes and for their defense. So Tennessee will have a personnel gap to exploit there.
Let's talk about the offense a little bit. First, the quarterback position. It's been or you expected it to be the Cade McNamara show, but it ended up being Deacon Hill, who's finished the season, as you mentioned earlier. Kind of what has Deacon Hill done this year? How has he stepped into that role? You just said that kind of the play calling's a little bit Jurassic, maybe, but how has he kind of handled this situation with Iowa's offense?
Well, it turned out that Deacon got more practice with the ones than any other quarterback on the Iowa roster this year because McNamara hadn't been cleared for 11 on 11 practicing during the spring. And Joe Labus, who had beaten Kentucky in the Music City Bowl last season, was also recovering from injury. So almost by default, Deacon Hill, who had been like himself a transfer from Wisconsin, was expecting to end up at I want to say it was Samford or Fordham, but I think it was Samford. It was one of those FCS teams. He was expecting to end up there and hadn't played any major college ball since 2020. So he like probably shouldn't have been starting for a major college football team, especially a Power 5 one, especially one trying to contend for a Big Ten championship. And being that he was pressed into a situation where he wasn't really in position to succeed, he made the most of it and, kept his knives to the grindstone. Was he making some mistakes? Oh yeah. And was the coaching situation ahead of him, like, was it conducive to success? No. Oh no. And Brian Ferentz is now pretty well out of a job. Like, he's 60 minutes away from not being Iowa's offensive coordinator anymore because of that. But nonetheless, Deacon has gone from a 260-pound water polo trained quarterback without a whole lot of Power 5 experience. And like, you watch this guy's mechanics, they're
Mhm.
going to look funky to you until you realize that he comes from a water polo family. And then all of a sudden, this like strange throwing angle that you'll see that never really comes up really high with the elbow, it'll make sense at that point. And he's got an absolute cannon for an arm. But in terms of accuracy, we're not really quite sure where that ball's going to go yet. So you'll see a little bit of that out of Hill too. But by and large, he has grown as a quarterback and grown in terms of accuracy, grown in terms of confidence, grown in terms of making fewer bonehead plays. But Tennessee will probably see a bonehead play or two out of him. And he'll take responsibility for it after the game too. So really a lot of growth out of a guy who was thrust into a position that wasn't really, putting him in position to succeed. And he's doing the best he can. But ultimately, I think Tennessee fans will see why Iowa has been averaging about 16 points a game this year.
And now his weapons that he's able to use in the pass game, the leading receiver on the team still at the end of the season is tight end Eric Hall. When you look at receiving yards, and that's a guy who hasn't played since October. So kind of what weapons does he have left to use? Obviously the tight end position, very popular over in Iowa. They've produced a lot of great NFL tight ends recently as well. But with the partially banged up, partially just transferred away secondary for Tennessee at this point, who's going to be really young and inexperienced in this bowl game, maybe who are some of the guys that he'll be looking to kind of try to exploit that?
Iowa has gotten more production out of a guy named Caleb Brown. And Brown was a transfer from Ohio State, was a high four-star receiver, but had played running back in high school. So he's got some of those running back skills in terms of, how do you get yards after contact? How do you, finish with your shoulder pads down, et cetera, et cetera. But it also means that he's growing as a receiver. So his path to the field wasn't quite as quick as Iowa fans wanted. And it, caused a little bit of static there too. But after a receiver ahead of Brown went down with an injury for what ended up being the end of the year, and he's going to end up transferring. It looks like he's going to transfer out Northeast. Deontay Vines is that receiver's name. Vines got hurt again. Brown stepped up and started to become a little bit of a weapon, started to fulfill that number one potential, and Iowa really needs that. So with all of this extra practice that Iowa can get from the bowl games, I think you're going to see a little bit of an incremental step up from Caleb Brown. I think you're going to see that incremental step up from Deacon Hill. You'll also see it from a guy at tight end named Addison Estrenga, who is in for the injured Lachey, who is in for the injured Eric All. And I had been planning on looking up whether or not All was still the leading receiver on the team. So thank you for that. But it is a perfect encapsulation of how challenged the Iowa passing game was and continues to be this year. Right. Let me look at this one up real quick here. Yeah, like Nico Runes, who's fine, but is not a tremendous wide receiver, even as a sixth-year senior, but he's 47 yards away from catching Eric Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not optimistic about that. So it's really plausible that Iowa finishes the season without a guy with even 300 receiving yards.
Yeah.
Like there are guys who have done that in a game this year in college football.
Yeah.
And Iowa will finish without anybody with doing that for the year. So a lot needs to be fixed. And again, some of that is outside of these guys' control, especially with injuries. But not all of it. And it's why Iowa is in the middle of what has been a, at times, embarrassing search for answers in the passing game. And it has led to the athletic director firing the offensive coordinator during the bye week, but effective at the end of the season, and basically starting that search for the offensive coordinator in the middle of the year. That too caused a lot of consternation in Iowa City, but we're going to end up like the whole situation is going to end up with a receiver not clearing 300 yards for the year with the entire receiving corps, none of them clearing 300 yards. So clearly, something had to happen. Something had to break. And this is what it looks like. And it's a little bit of a mess. So the fact that Tennessee doesn't really have a whole lot of warm bodies at secondary, Ryan,
Mhm.
I'll just tell you this right now, it's probably not going to matter. You I don't know what your 40 is, you personally, but if it's under 6, they could probably run you at strong safety for, you could be a rotation piece.
Yeah, we'll see about that, but I think that'll make a lot of Tennessee fans happy because right now you have two guys that started this season in the secondary that are still on track to play in this bowl game. So it should be a good experience, I guess, for these young guys to maybe uh, get their feet wet a little bit in a good game in a big atmosphere and kind of with a lot of attention on them without maybe getting torched and ruining some confidence. But we can sit here and talk about Iowa's offense and the woes that come with that all day. But this team won 10 games and they were represented in the Big Ten championship game. So clearly something's going right, and that is the defense. They've been phenomenal. Can you tell me about this defense and kind of what they've been able to do to give this team so much success and kind of save the season a little bit?
Everything on the defense starts with Phil Parker, who is the defensive coordinator, has been on Kirk Ferentz's staff for as long as Kirk Ferentz has been in Iowa City, which is coming up on a quarter of a decade now. And he has been the defensive coordinator itself ever since Norm Parker, who's of no relation, but is a name that should be familiar to longtime SEC fans, who's he had come from Vanderbilt. He had been a pretty successful defensive coordinator there. Went to Iowa, became great, had some health problems, and retired. Phil Parker, who came up through Nick Saban as a defensive back at Michigan State, took over, ascended from D-backs coach to defensive coordinator, and he's great. And Iowa is perennially a top 5 defense in pretty much every major statistical category, or top 10 in every statistical category for several years now. And we're talking about total defense, total yards, like scoring deep, like the big ones.
Hmm.
Iowa's top 5, top 10 every year. And it's because Phil Parker runs a system that is not simple, or excuse me, it's not easy, but it's simple. The pre-snap recognition and the assignments that these guys get is not necessarily a whole lot to keep track of, but they have to be precise about it. They have to be right. And the end result is these guys are in position to make plays and are rarely finding themselves out of position where the opponent can make their big chunk plays themselves. And they just find good, smart players to play these positions too. So Iowa's defense will challenge Tennessee quite a bit, even with Cooper DeJean missing, because DeJean was a first team All American cornerback and extremely difficult to throw on. And Iowa's secondary takes a step back without DeJean in there. It just has to. So Tennessee will have more opportunity to throw the ball downfield than it would have if Iowa were completely healthy. That being said, this is not a situation where one piece makes all of this fall apart.
Hmm.
And Iowa also has an All-American in Jay Higgins at middle linebacker, who is capable of directing the defense and making sure that everybody's assignments are great. And he's been pretty close to flawless at that. Same goes for the free safety, Quinn Schulte, who has spent basically all year as one of the highest rated tacklers in PFF. And you look at this kid, and he's maybe 6 feet tall, maybe a buck 95 when you're actually talking to him, and he hits like a truck. And Sebastian Castro is the cashbacker, and everyone who's played cashbacker at Iowa has gone on to the NFL. And we're talking about guys like Amani Hooker, Dane Belton, Geno Stone. Like, these are guys making bank in the NFL too. They're starting. They're right? They are contributors to NFL defenses. Castro's going to be that same guy. So Iowa has a lot of dangerous guys on defense, even with Cooper out. There's a lot of guys who can turn Tennessee over. There's guys who are going to make it very difficult to run on them, especially missing that 1,000-yard rusher. Like, this is going to be tough. And Iowa cut its teeth against some pretty darn, like, in terms of offensive line quality, some pretty darn tough offenses. In terms of skill position quality, maybe not so much. So there, that's going to be where the big challenge is. But Tennessee really needs to have its A game ready on offense, or Iowa's going to press them into some mistakes and capitalize on them.
So how do you see this game going? Because it's kind of different styles of approach here with Tennessee wanting to get the tempo up and primarily focusing on the offensive end. And it's kind of the opposite for Iowa. I saw someone on Twitter call it the tortoise and the hare bowl, and I thought that was kind of funny. How do you see this one going, though? Who's going to win? Kind of what's this game going to look like?
Yeah, tortoise and the hare bowl is actually really good
Yeah.
because when I watch Iowa football, I see like World War I football. I don't mean like leather helmets and single wing. I mean like trench warfare, Battle of Verdun. Like, it's just rock fight, shell shock, and you look up and has anybody even moved after after a few years? So, I mean, obviously Tennessee is favored by, I think last I saw was 8.5 points, and that feels about right, especially with Iowa's secondary missing a huge piece in DeJean. So I think this is going to be a low scoring game, as most of Iowa's games have been. And, I don't think Tennessee is going to be necessarily hurt all that much by the personnel missing in the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Tennessee, I mean, if you're asking me to put money down, I think this is looking like about I don't know, a 13-3, a 13-7 game, maybe 16-7 ish, which by Iowa standards is practically a barn burner.
Yeah.
But it's, how's Iowa going to move the ball 80 yards against even a depleted Tennessee defense? It's going to be tough. Now, it might be the case that these 15 extra practices they've gotten with the bowl game have been exactly what guys like Hill and Brown need. And, there is something to be said for that. They are going to get a few guys back from injury. But by and large, this is the sort of this is the sort of offense that Tennessee defense that has a bunch of second string guys in. Like, this is who you want them cutting their teeth against. So it'll be interesting to watch. I think it'll be more instructive for how next season is going to go than it is a reflection of how good these two teams this season has been this year. So I'm interested in that aspect of it too, and for that reason, I'm not going to be too upset if Iowa loses this game, because I don't think Iowa fans should be all that upset about it too, because ultimately you're looking for how guys who should be stepping into bigger roles next year, you're looking to see how they perform as much as anything else. So, yeah, I'm going to say my prediction is going to be Tennessee wins 16-7. What about you?
That's kind of me and my coworker Noah Taylor. We've kind of said very, very similar scores where we say I think Tennessee wins this one, but probably by about 5-7-8, somewhere in that range. But I don't know if either team goes over 20. It's kind of what we've landed on as well. And I think that's kind of you mentioned Vegas agrees with that projection as well. And I think that a lot of people talking about this game have kind of been in the same boat.
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned that some teams get more they get more up for bowl games than others. Are you expecting a full effort out of Tennessee coming into this game?
I am, because I think a lot of the guys that are playing in this bowl game are trying to prove something for next season, similar to what you just said about Iowa on that side. But if you look at a lot of the positions, it's either a senior who's out of eligibility who wants to kind of end with one last hurrah. We talked to Ramel Keaton, a fifth-year wide receiver who's done after this year, and during his press conference, he said multiple times, like, we just want to finish things on the right foot. We want to finish things with a win. I personally want to have a good performance and kind of end it on the right note. So you have guys like that, and then you also have these guys that are freshmen and redshirt freshmen and sophomores who maybe didn't play a lot this year, but they have the opportunity to be a starter next year, and they want to prove to the coaching staff right now that they deserve to get those snaps. So some of it maybe selfish isn't the right word, but some of it maybe just for personal reasons that guys are going to wake up for this game. But I do think that they're here and they're ready, and that this would be a big deal for them to play well in this game.
Yeah, then I think Iowa's going to be in the same boat on that. So I think this should be like a good, spirited,
Yeah.
competitive game. The one thing that I'll just throw out there too is that Tennessee does need to come out clean, because one last thing about the way Iowa plays, and really the only way that any of this works, is that since 2015, Kirk Ferentz and Iowa are, I think the stat is something like 73-2 at this point, when they have an 8-point lead.
Okay.
Not an 8-point lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Not a there aren't these huge qualifications attached to it. All they have to do is go up by 8, and it's practically a guaranteed victory. And that has so much to do with the way that this defense operates. The defense forces offenses into all right, we need to take a shot here. Well, the defense is going to be ready for that. They're schemed to be ready to take those away. So Tennessee needs to be careful that they don't let Iowa get that high ground, even if it's early, even if it's the first quarter, the first half, what have you. You let Iowa get up, and all of a sudden, it turns into one of those boa constrictor games. So a little bit of caution there, but as long as Tennessee takes care of its business and makes sure that Iowa doesn't get any easy points on offense, or doesn't give up any defensive points directly, I would expect the Volunteers to win. But Heupel better have these boys ready. I'm going to say that much.
And I think what could get interesting about this game is with the difference of tempos. If Tennessee comes out in this game and let's say they get the opening kickoff and go 3 and out, and then get the ball back, move the chains once, and then punt, you might be going into halftime with like 4 minutes of possession just because of the way how fast Tennessee goes and how slow Iowa goes. That could play into that whole kind of, you need to get out to a fast start, and that goes to Tennessee's offense. If you don't get out to a fast start and put together some drives early, you might be heading to the locker room at halftime, and you may feel like you were on defense for all 30 minutes. So I think that's something to note as well. But we always do keys to success late in the week, so we'll have that this week as well. And maybe that's a bit of a preview into that. It's kind of what Tennessee needs to do is, let's get off to a fast start, and let's make sure we get some drives put together. But Adam, thank you for joining the show. I really appreciate it. Tell everyone where they can find your work, where they can find you on social media, and all of that.
You bet. We are at iowa.rivals.com. GoIowaAwesome is the name of the site. You can find me at Adam_Jacobi on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. And our GoIowaAwesome Twitter account is just at IowaAwesome. And you can find all of our work there as well. And I will be publishing a Tennessee Fans Guide to Iowa Football yet today, Tuesday. So be looking for that this afternoon/evening. But that is where I got the World War I line. So a little bit of a spoiler alert there. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, everyone make sure you go check out GoIowaAwesome. They do a fantastic job over there, and that sounds like something that Tennessee fans should definitely check out, a nice guide to Iowa football, because it should be unlike anything that Tennessee fans have seen from the opposition to this point this season, maybe not for a long time. So, Adam, thanks again for joining the show. I appreciate it. Make sure you guys head over to VolReport.com as well to find all of our content. I'm on Twitter at Ryan T. Sylvia. And thank you guys for watching.